we talked earlier that, you know, this is very outdated in terms of like cell phones and texting plans and things like that. But we kind of talked about it whenever they had cell phones, and before it, basically everything became unlimited and stuff like that. You had monthly fees, or you paid for so many, and then it was everything over. So in this case, you just kind of have to go with it. Plan A says that you have a monthly fee of $15 with a charge of 8 cents per text. Plan B has a monthly fee of $3, so it's $12 less per month, but every text message is 12 cents that you actually make. So the biggest thing is making sure you know the difference between what you're talking about. So the first one, you have Plan A, and then it is 8 cents per text. Oop. Hey, hit the freeze on the... Nope, the remote.
I see it lost.
Boom. Found it. Then you have Plan B, where it's $3 a month and then 12 cents for every text that you make. So in the grand scheme of things, you know, you may say, hey, this one's $15. I don't want to pay $15. And even though the text or the price per text is less, whereas the other one, it may seem, okay, it's only $3, so I'm going to go from there. So it really just becomes, when is it more cost effective for you to use which plan? Okay. So the first one says express the monthly cost for Plan A, F as a function for the number of text messages per month, which is going to be X. Now the only, I guess, problem with functions is if we write everything in terms of X, just making sure you know what we're talking about and what X actually is. So if X is really just the number of text, you may put that somewhere kind of off to the side, that X is equal to the number of text messages, or the number of texts that we're going to make. So how are we actually going to write the first one? So basically the one in green, how are we going to write that in terms of X? 15 plus 0.08x. Okay, good. So $15. So if you don't make one single text message and you just use the VPN or you use the school Wi-Fi and you have an iPhone or whatever and you can just iMessage everything and you don't send one text message, then it's going to cost you $15. Okay, if you're going to send it through Twitter or Snapchat or whatever else you all do to get through the firewall. So the other one is going to be in terms of g of x. X is still the number of texts per month. Okay, but how are we going to write this one? How is it different? How is the one in yellow different from the one in green? Anybody?
3 plus 0.12.
There you go. 0.12x. So now that we have our two functions, it says for how many text messages with the cost for the two plans to be the same. So what do we need to do with basically the f of x function and the g of x function? Set them equal to each other. So we want to know whenever they're the same. So the same just means that we're going to take f of x equal to g of x. So I'm just going to replace, I'm going to have 15 plus 0.08x equals 3 plus 0.12x. Now I'm just solving for x. I'm trying to figure out how many text messages before or whenever they are the same. So from there, I would just subtract the 3 from each one so I can keep everything positive, and then subtract 0.08x from each side. So I'm looking at 12 equal to 0.04x. Give myself a little bit more room up here. What do I need to divide by? 0.04. Okay. So how many text messages? 300 text messages. Okay, you all probably send that in a day. So like on 4, you have 200 feet of fence to enclose a rectangular garden. Now, if you have 200 feet of fence, first off, let's finish it. So then it says, express the area of a garden A as a function of one of its dimensions. Now, the biggest thing to get you to understand, even though you have, like in terms of you're used to dealing with anything that's rectangular is length and width, right? Okay. Whereas here, it wants you to find the dimension in terms of x. So it really just becomes, x is just a dimension. So length and width is really just an arbitrary title that we give to like your table. Okay? Like you would probably say that this is the length and that's the width, right? Why? Because right, you always associate length with the longer side and width with the shorter side. Okay? When in the grand scheme of things, there's really no such thing as length and width. Does that make sense? Because it's just two different dimensions. So if you have 200 feet of fence, then it becomes like how you would normally write everything is like if we just use length and width kind of as a, like the perimeter of anything is just 2 times the length plus 2 times the width, right? Well, what's your perimeter of your actual fence? 200, right? Because you only have 200 feet of fence, or yeah, 200 feet of fence. So you only have 200 feet of fence. So if I have 200 feet of fence, and it's 2 plus L or 2L plus 2W, how much actual fence am I going to get in terms of my length and like of my width? So from this corner to the corner on Abby's right, how much is that going to add up to? 100, right? Because it's half of it. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. So really what we're dealing with is 100 equal to whatever the length is plus the width. Now, again, length and width are really just arbitrary values. Okay? Because your length is your length, but your width is really just going to be
another one.
Right, it's just going to be 100 minus whatever your length is. Does that make sense? So if we have, since we can't make it like X and Y, but what basically are, you have one value that's going to be like one side is X, the other side, oh, let me do it this way, is going to be 100 minus X. Is like side 2. Does that make sense? So you really have like side 1 and side 2. You don't try not to think about it as length and width. So if you have, let's call it side 1 and side 2 instead of. So if I have side 1 and side 2, I'm actually trying to figure out what the area is. Okay. So what am I actually going to do with side 1 and side 2? If it's area. Yeah. So if it's area and it's in terms of X, so if I'm just going to write everything in terms of X, the area of whatever value that I use, if I measure one side, not mattering if it's the first one or the second side, is just going to be X times 100 minus X. Does that make sense? So I'm okay with you either writing it this way, or you can actually multiply and have 100x minus x squared. So then it works for any value. So like say this side of the table or this side of the fence was 36 feet. Okay? Even if it's the short side, then you would just go 100 times 36 minus 36 squared. And then you'll get whatever's left to find what the actual area is. Okay?